Texas back to the Big 12 championship game for the first time since 2018. It's a huge week here at Horns 24/7. Thanks for joining us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel for the game preview. Alongside me is Chip Brown of Horns 24/7. Chip, appreciate you making the time as always. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Longhorns' opponent in this game, the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Their last meeting back in 2022, Oklahoma State wins it in Stillwater 41-34. The Cowboys making their second Big 12 championship game appearance. Their first was back in 2021 in that heartbreaking loss to Baylor, where they were about a yard and a half away from not only winning the Big 12 championship, but possibly punching a ticket to the college football playoff. Texas 3-3 in Big 12 championship games. Their last appearance was in 2018. They lost to the Oklahoma Sooners in that game. Their last win was back in 2009. All right, Chip, so it's been a while since the Horns have been in Arlington, and a big test for the Texas run defense, but it feels like this is a unit that has been tested all year long. However, I think we can both agree that they faced the best back they've faced all season in Oklahoma State's Ollie Gordon. He leads the nation in rushing yards with 1,580 yards, 20 touchdowns on the ground, averaging 6.4 yards per carry and 136.6 yards per game, on the ground. Texas's run defense, though, fourth in the nation. They give up 2.93 yards per carry and 85 rushing yards a game in total to their opposing teams. What do you make of this matchup early in the week?
Yeah, I mean, this is the marquee matchup of the Big 12 title game. Ollie Gordon, who single-handedly turned around Oklahoma State's season by going to the coaching staff after a 33-7 loss to South Alabama and saying, hey, give me the rock. I can handle this. I can help. And he has. I mean, last 8 games, Ollie Gordon averaging 26 carries, 168 yards rushing per game. Of course, as you mentioned, he's got 20 rushing touchdowns on the season. He's a kid from the Dallas area, Euless Trinity. So he's going to be coming home with some fire in his belly to show everyone what's going on there at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. But big T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. T'Vondre Sweat, the newly minted Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, and Byron Murphy, the Big 12 Defensive Lineman of the Year. Can't wait to get their hands on Ollie Gordon, just like they couldn't wait to get their hands on Texas Tech's Taj Brooks, who was the nation's number 3 leading rusher, and Texas held him under 100 yards in that 57-7 blowout of the Red Raiders. Oklahoma State doesn't have a lot that scares you outside of Ollie Gordon. Obviously, Alan Bowman, he's got more interceptions, 11, than he does touchdown passes, 10. And Brennan Presley is a really active receiver. He's their leading receiver. He's dangerous on the return game. Those are, the weapons that you have to keep an eye on. But if you can kind of cut off the head of the snake and Ollie Gordon and make Oklahoma State one-dimensional, that's when problems have really surfaced for the Cowboys. That's certainly what Central Florida was able to do against Oklahoma State in rainy conditions in their 45-3 rout of Oklahoma State earlier this month. So the mission is simple, Tommy. T'Vondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, and that Jaylan Ford, that Texas defensive front. Just get your hands on Ollie Gordon. Make sure you get him to the ground. I think Taj Brooks is a little better back, a little tougher back to handle than Ollie Gordon, who's more of a one cut and get north and south. And if you don't give him that seam, he doesn't have the patience that or the tackle breaking ability of Taj Brooks. So looks like a good matchup for the Texas Longhorns.
Yeah, Chip, it's going to be really good. I'm really looking forward to getting up there on Saturday to watch that. Feels like that's going to be where this game is won, I think, and we'll touch on that a little bit more later. Going back to that game last year, I think you and I can agree that it was Quinn Ewers' worst game by far as a Texas Longhorn. He goes 19 of 49, somehow still gets 319 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions. So that was the last true road game that Texas lost. Take a second to take that in. That's the last true road game that Texas has lost in the Steve Sarkisian era from last year. So, that one attests to how good Texas has been this season. But two, when you look back at that game, it's a game that Quinn Ewers wants to forget about and certainly wants to avenge. How does he turn it around this time on a neutral field?
Well, Quinn Ewers is going home to AT&T Stadium, just a stone's throw from South Lake, where he grew up. And I just think he's a different quarterback. Now, he's different for a couple different reasons. He's more experienced. He went to Alabama and stared down the Crimson Tide in Tuscaloosa. We saw him deliver big time on that stage. But he's different now because he's also playing through an AC joint sprain in his throwing shoulder. Still, Quinn Ewers has come up clutch when he's needed to. The 35-yard pass on 3rd and 12 to kind of seal the TCU game. And then last week, he didn't have prolific numbers, but he did enough, certainly, to get Texas into field goal range or whatever they needed to build that 57-7 route against Texas Tech. So I think, and Quinn Ewers said last year that after the Oklahoma win, where he threw for 4 touchdowns and they won 49-0, he thought he had things figured out. Then after the Oklahoma State loss, he realized how much more detail-oriented he needed to be in studying opposing defenses. Steve Sarkisian didn't help Quinn Ewers a ton in that game either. Sarkisian should have kept running the ball with Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson there in the fourth quarter, and Texas probably could have put that game away. And so I think this is a more mature Quinn Ewers with better weapons. I mean, he's got a better Xavier Worthy. He's got Adonai Mitchell. He's got JT Sanders. It's in climate control. Remember that game in Stillwater? There was a 20-mile-an-hour wind and reports that Ewers had slammed his throwing hand in a door that week. I mean, it was just a wild sequence of events. But I do think that this is a better Quinn Ewers, a better offense, even without Jonathan Brooks at running back. And I think that Texas is going to be able to move the football. And I would say this too, Tommy, for Steve Sarkisian, Oklahoma State, number 1 in the nation in 4th down conversion percentage defense. No need to go for it on 4th down. Take the points. Let Bert Auburn kick the field goals. He kicked 5 of them last week in a 57-7 route. Don't give Oklahoma State any opportunity for a momentum shift. Take the points. And, Texas didn't go for it on 4th down last week until Arch Manning was in the game. So that seemed like a pretty good recipe for the Longhorns.
Yeah, Sarkisian heeded your advice last week, and I think you could point back to that Iowa State game too as a game where I think he showed a little bit that he was more willing to take the points as opposed to going for it on 4th down. Speaking of the Cowboys, we're talking about Mike Gundy now, their head coach, newly minted Big 12 Coach of the Year. He's won 9 of his last 13 against Texas, including the last 2 against Steve Sarkisian. He's turned the ship around after Oklahoma State lost that South Alabama game back in week 3. What is it going to take for the Cowboys to really, turn the ship and give Texas a fight when it seems like on paper Texas has a massive advantage in this game, but you just know with the success that Mike Gundy's had, it feels like you can't count out the Cowboys.
Well, the thing about Mike Gundy is he's made good adjustments. He's made them in game against Texas in years past, including the last 2 years against Steve Sarkisian, where Texas had double-digit leads and Oklahoma State was able to adjust, come back, win. Steve Sarkisian, like I said, has made some questionable decisions in those games by not running the football more. But I think he's learned from those mistakes, but don't test it because Mike Gundy and his staff have done a good job of adjusting. Look at Oklahoma State. Now you can say, getting down 23-9 against Houston, getting down 24-6 last week against BYU, that the Cowboys were not playing well, but they adjusted and they found ways to come back and win those games and get into this Big 12 title game. I do think that Mike Gundy, the way he sounded this week, he was, sounding confident. A dog barked in the middle of his press conference, and he's like, "Oh, that must be Sarkisian around," and he couldn't even remember, or he feigned like he couldn't remember that Mac Brown was the coach when Mike Gundy started playing Texas 20 years ago. And when he was asked, how do you handle T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, he said, well, you can double them some, or we can do what we've done the last 15 years and block them. To which Byron Murphy responded on social media, 11 a.m. So we know this is a Texas team right now that is keeping receipts. They got after Jared Hufford at Iowa State. They played the video of Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark telling Joey McGuire to take care of business against Texas with 38 seconds left in that game last week. Kind of an uncharacteristic move by Texas. But hey, this is a Texas team that's on a revenge tour. They're 3-0 on their revenge tour against teams that have beat them last year, against Alabama, TCU, and against oh God, who's the other team that they lost to last year that they beat this year? Alabama, Texas Tech. Hello. And they can make it 4-0 with the win Saturday in AT&T Stadium. And I think they will. I think Texas, better culture, different team, better defensive line, better Quinn Ewers. Bert Auburn, 19 straight field goals. Probably should have been the Big 12 Special Teams Player of the Year. They whiffed on that one. But yeah, I think that's how you respond to Mike Gundy. And for the only way I see Oklahoma State winning this game is if Texas commits a bunch of unforced errors, turnovers, penalties, that kind of thing, and lets this game, slip away with self-inflicted wounds.
Giving Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat bulletin board material didn't really work for Iowa State too much last time. We'll see if maybe Mike Gundy has some more success. That transitions perfectly into game predictions. Chip, take it away.
Well, I kind of laid it out there, but I just think that this is a Texas team on a mission. And if they bring the same energy that they brought to DKR against Texas Tech last week, then this could be ugly. And I think it will be ugly. I think it'll be Texas 37, Oklahoma State 10. What about you, Tommy?
Chip, that might be the closest we have been on our predictions all season. And this is our 13th edition of this. So, I'm with you there. I think that this is a game that really the last 2 weeks have convinced me that this Texas team is different from when they were blowing those second half leads coming out of the bye week. I think they learned from that. And I think they know that they need to finish now and play all 4 quarters. I think that Iowa State game was a lot bigger of a win than the score will show. I think that was a game that Texas dominated. And then obviously they show it last week against TCU in the score box. So I'm going Texas 38. Texas Tech, thank you. I'm going Texas 38, Oklahoma State 14. I think this is going to be a huge win for Texas. And Chip will kind of finish with this. I think Texas needs a big win if they want to show the College Football Playoff Committee that they deserve a spot in the top 4. Obviously, a lot has to happen outside of that, probably the biggest thing being Louisville beating Florida State. But the committee has kept Oregon in front of the Longhorns now the entire time the poll has been out for the College Football Playoff rankings. So, Chip, would you say that a bigger win would be enough to catapult the Longhorns over Oregon if, say, it comes down to a Ducks or Longhorns in a final spot for the playoff?
Well, this committee, I don't know what they're looking at. I mean, they've had Oregon ahead of Texas from the first set of rankings on Halloween, and it makes no sense whatsoever. Now, maybe at the time you thought Utah was a better team than it is, and maybe you thought the Pac-12 had more quality teams in it than it has turned out, but Texas should have moved past Oregon. Texas should have been ahead of Oregon from the beginning because of the win at Alabama. Oregon has no win comparable. They have a win over Oregon State. That is their only win over a ranked opponent right now. And that is not comparable to going into Tuscaloosa, where the previous 53 opponents were 1-52. So this committee is, I don't know what they're looking at. They value losses more than they value wins. They seem to love Oregon against Washington. Maybe they were, I don't know. They were talking about Bo Nix's completion percentage, for God's sake, and talking about why Oregon is ahead of Texas in the poll. And then, of course, they drop Ohio State in front of Texas this past week. Ohio State just lost to Michigan. Again, it's like they look at the losses and think that the losses are more important. Those are better losses to Washington, to Ohio State, to Michigan than Texas's loss to Oklahoma. How about looking at the wins? How about looking at Texas's defense? Does this committee even bother to look at the fact that Texas is number 1 in the nation in third down percentage conversion defense, number 1 in red zone defense, number 4 in rushing defense, and has Outland Trophy finalist T'Vondre Sweat on the defensive line? Or is that too much of a deep dive for this committee? It is absolutely confounding to me that Oregon has been ahead of Texas every step of the way. And who knows what this committee's going to decide if Alabama and Oregon and Texas all win this weekend. They're going to find themselves in an incredible situation that could have been avoided if Oregon was behind both Texas and Alabama at this point.
Yeah, certainly a bit confusing to see what this committee's looking for, but the one thing the Longhorns can do to help themselves out is win. And they'll have to win on Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Central Time kickoff at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. Looking forward to being there and watching what should be a good game between the Longhorns and the Cowboys. Thank you all so much for joining us here on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. As always, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you are the first to know when new content heads your way. For Chip Brown, the rest of the crew, I'm Tommy Yarsh. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.